Hello everyone, thank you for joining and welcome to another one of our webinars. Well, actually, it's not just another one. For today, we prepared a special webinar where we will use the combined forces of SysKit and Sql Docket to help you maintain a healthy SQL environment. But before we start with that, let's do a short introduction. My name is Silvio and I'm a business development manager at Acceleratio. Here with me we have Frane, the SysKit and Sql Docket product owner, who will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. Please say hello to our guest, Frane.
Hello guys, how are you?
Okay, so Acceleratio is a software development company based in Croatia, and we specialize in creating enterprise solutions for platforms like SQL, SharePoint, Windows Server, Citrix, and other platforms alike. We currently have over 2,500 clients from more than 70 countries across the globe. And many of those clients are large-scale companies such as IBM, Coca-Cola, Rolex. Well, you can recognize most logos from this slide here. And we currently have 3 products. You can see them all on this slide. We have SysKit, the server monitoring and administration tool, Sql Docket used for SharePoint documentation and management, and Sql Docket, the auto-discover and documentation tool for SQL servers. If you'd like to know more about any of our products, just check our company webpage or contact our sales team. I believe you will find all the information you require. So first, let us go through the webinar agenda. I will explain a few housekeeping rules and how you can ask your questions using the GoToWebinar application. After that, we'll do a short SysKit and Sql Docket overview, followed by the short intro in today's topic. Next, we'll have a demo where I will present you all the possibilities SysKit and Sql Docket offer when it comes to SQL performance. Of course, at the end of the webinar, we'll have our usual Q&A session where Frane here will be answering all your questions. To start with the housekeeping rules, you can ask your questions during the entire webinar, and the most interesting ones will be answered publicly at the end. A recording of this webinar will be available online tomorrow, and well, in about a week, you can expect the webinar summary to be published, and it will have all your webinar questions answered. Now, speaking of questions, if you'd like to ask a question using this GoToWebinar application, all you need to do is open the questions chat box and type them in there. All your questions will be answered by our product team, and you will find them all in our webinar summary, as I've already said. So, let's shortly explain what SysKit is if there is someone who is not familiar with it. So, SysKit is a server monitoring and administration tool designed to help system admins in their daily tasks. So, basically with SysKit, you can monitor user activity, application usage, server performance, you can track server inventory, you can generate documentation, you can elementary audit everything happening on your servers. SysKit also enables you to simplify remote server management tasks, and it does that with the help of PowerShell GUI that we created. So to put it simply, it's really an all-around tool for any system admin and any environment. It is also important that SysKit is an agentless tool, meaning you can monitor and manage all your servers from one central console. And we also have a SysKit web application available, which enables you to reach your monitoring data from absolutely anywhere. All you need is a browser and, well, internet connection. Now, for those who don't know about Sql Docket, our second star of tonight, the Sql Docket is a SQL server management tool, and it is designed to help database admins and consultants in their daily tasks. So with Docket, you can auto-discover SQL server instances, and you can document the entire SQL server environment. This means you can create a comprehensive SQL inventory with valuable information about your SQL servers, SQL BI services, databases, host servers, and so on. You can also perform security management actions like grant, revoke, drop, and all of it can be done simultaneously across multiple SQL servers, saving you much time. So whether you need to create a new login on SQL servers, give or remove someone's permissions, delete outdated principles, basically with Sql Docket you can manage everything related to your SQL servers. It is also important to mention that Sql Docket offers SQL best practices, and they can dramatically help you maintain optimal system performance. Now we'll talk more about that later since it's one of our topics today. And we get to talk about it now. I mean, not only best practices, about SQL Server performance and globally. So we'll start with the SQL Performance Counters and services. So whenever something bad is happening on your SQL servers and databases, it affects the usage experience for your end users. Now the effects can be seen as the page load issues on your SharePoint site, as slow application responses, as lack of free disk space, and many of that issues can be tracked directly back to the SQL servers. And this is why you are there to timely fix those issues, right? And this is the main reason why you should be monitoring your SQL servers 24/7 and as detailed as possible. There are literally like hundreds of SQL performance counters. You will see that later in our demo. And each one shows you that one important bit of information that can help you troubleshoot a specific issue. So what SysKit enables you is to monitor all existing SQL performance counters and services. And you can track them in real time, and you can track them historically in the logging type. So for each counter or service you're tracking with SysKit, you can set up an alert, and if that specific counter crosses above the given threshold, the SysKit will instantly notify you with email. Now, the same thing goes for the SQL services. If a critical service stops, SysKit will not only notify you, but it will try to restart it automatically. So whenever something bad happens and you have SysKit, you will be the first one to know. It is also good to keep the historical performance logs of all your SQL performance counters, because you never know, and it is often that you will need to check the logs from like some time ago, 2 weeks ago, I don't know, so you can confirm a, I don't know, hypothesis that you have. And SysKit enables you just that. Now, another great thing you can do is you can compare the performance of two SQL servers. And that comes very handy. Well, let's say you have one server that is kind of acting weird, and you can compare that problematic server for each counter with the baseline server that you know is not showing any issues. And that way you can find exactly which counter values are off, and that will point you in the right direction to troubleshooting the issue at hand. Now, I'm talking about the performance counters here, and I don't expect you all to know which SQL performance counters and which services you are supposed to monitor. There's many of them. So to help you out, SysKit provides you with monitoring templates for specific SQL server roles. They consist of services and counters that are most important, and they all have thresholds set according to the Microsoft's best practices. Now another thing that you want to do besides just, well, troubleshooting issues when they happen is preventing those issues from ever occurring, especially the big ones like running out of disk space. So, I mean, if you already experienced issues, your users experience them probably too. And then it's a bit late if it's kind of a big deal. So, better be safe than sorry. Sql Docket forecasts the growth of your entire SQL environment, so you will never surprisingly, well, run out of space unless you're really trying to run out of space, right? We can predict the growth of disk usage, database sizes, and log sizes. Now, each of these parameters is very important for the stability of your SQL servers, and knowing how large it will get in a, well, let's say in a feasible future is of great help for a system admin. We all know that running out of disk space will bring SQL Server to the failure, and that's a big problem. And you know, uncontrollable growth of your database size will definitely be the doing of that. And growth of database logs can lead to that. So basically it is all connected, and yes, it is definitely a good idea to plan all your moves ahead. And for that, you need forecasting. Also, you can compare growth forecasts for all your servers, all your database in the same view, and that can give you a certain insight in potentially arising problems. And finally, I'm sorry, the SQL best practices. Now, what really are the best practices? So first of all, the best practices I'm referred here are the recommended settings for your SQL servers. Of course, some of the settings depend on the environment, but they're all made by the Microsoft recommendation, and Microsoft always aims to cover most common use cases. So aligning with those best practices will definitely help you gain optimal SQL Server performance and prevent common database issues. Now, I'm going to mention just some of those best practices to give you the idea. So, for example, when we're talking about disk allocation size, you should always set the block size to 64 kilobits to gain the maximum performance from your SQL server. Also, if you're optimizing your SQL Server memory, you should definitely be aware that SQL Server changes its requirements dynamically, and that way it can potentially take up all of your memory and the memory that OS is using too. So you should always set your max server memory to be at least 1 gigabyte less than you have available. So that way operational system always has optimal resources to work. In SQL Docket we currently have around 40 best practices, and definitely more are to come with the next releases. So SQL Docket will help you detect all servers that are not yet aligned with SQL best practices, and then it will help you align them. I'll show you more of these best practices in our demo, and I believe it is the time that we get to it. So let me just switch to my demo environment. Okay, so this is our demo environment, and for starters I'm gonna guide you through the performance monitoring part of SysKit and explain you how to use it. For those of you who are familiar with the performance monitoring in SysKit, just wait up. Soon we'll come to the event forecasting and SQL best practices, and you'll love that. So now I'm gonna start with showing you just how the performance monitoring works in SysKit. So here we have the performance dashboard in the performance part of the SysKit reports, and this dashboard is showing us kind of an overview of entire system. So we have all the computers and their status, all the computers groups and their statuses. We have all the alerts that happened within past 24 hours. Of course, we can drill deeper to get a more detailed report. And we see all the top computers by CPU, memory consumption, CPU utilization, disk space usage, and so on. So we can see here that some of our servers have critical status, some are healthy, some are in warning status, and if we just click on the chart, SysKit takes us to another dashboard, a more detailed one, from where we can drill down to single server overview dashboard. I'm just gonna use this one, which is warning now. Okay, and now we're in single server or computer overview, or however we want to call it, but the point is that this view is the most basic and, well, most comprehensive view of the performance of a single server. So we have some basic information. We have CPU, memory, disk consumptions, read-write, we have memory usage, we have top processes. And the important thing is that we can see by the color here that there is something wrong. It is not green, right? So if there was something wrong with the memory, it would have that color. But we can see here that it is more of a SharePoint Connect stuff. Now this is just an example. So we can simply drill down into a specific counter, and now we see this is the counter that is causing the problems and that made that server alert us. We can easily compare that server with another server for the same counter here, and this other has such small numbers that we can't even see it on the same chart. Now this works for every server we have here. I'm just going to return to the dashboard here, and we can choose the SQL server, for example this one. And again, we drill down and we can see that there is something wrong with this server. We check everything and everything seems fine, but if we go deeper, we can see the problem is not in the performance counters, but the problem is in the monitored services. So it seems here that one of the SQL services, important one, have stopped, and it should definitely be started again or taking a look at why it was stopped. Of course, from this view, we can drill deeper to anything we are monitoring for that server. So let's say to the transactions. We can simply drill down, and for this server we can see number of transactions for each database. Now it will be much easier for you to understand how this works after I explain you what are the monitoring templates. Then it will all sit down to you. So we provide you with monitoring templates for various server roles. For example, this is an SQL template, and as you can see, each monitoring template has the description, a list of all performance counters and services that are monitored with their threshold values and instructions on what should SysKit do if the threshold is crossed or the service has stopped. So let's say the threshold is crossed and the SysKit will send you an email alert that there is something wrong. Each of these templates can easily be assigned to any computer. Simply click here, and as you can see, this is an SQL template, and we already have all the SQL servers, but just to show you how easy it is, we simply select a server and then it's there, and if you want to remove it, we just do it that way. The same works for the computer groups. And also each of these templates can, you can download additional templates. I forgot to mention that. If you click on download templates here, you can download some additional templates, of course, first read the description for what the template is and use the same procedure that I just did after you download the template. Just click the install. Okay, and as you can see, we can simply add computers to that template, and each template can be modified per your own needs, and this is the important stuff. I'm gonna enter the SQL monitoring template since we are talking about the SQL performance monitoring. We just click on modify. Okay, on the first step we have the name and the description, but then we have the counters. Now, just to show you how many counters there are in the SQL you can actually monitor, I'm gonna load them all here. It will take few seconds, but I don't think it will take too long. Now for this template we have chosen only the most important SQL performance counters you should be monitoring on your SQL servers, but you can add any counters you want. And as you can see, there is very very large number of counters to choose from and to use to monitor. It's very easy. You just select any counter and just add it here. In our next step, we can configure any counter. Again, I don't know, we can buffer cache hit ratio, and we can select the warning threshold, critical threshold. We can easily change it. We can set up what will SysKit do if something happens with that template and if something is wrong. The same thing works for the services. There are all services for that server load here for the SQL 2016, and you can see there is many services to track. We are mostly tracking, of course, the SQL services, since they are crucial for what we are trying to do here. So basically, what all counters and services that we selected for a specific template, in this case SQL, will be monitored on all the servers that were assigned to that servers. And if we go back to the performance report, to the detailed analysis, here we can see all of them. So we just select a server, and each of that server has certain monitoring templates applied to it, and you can simply monitor that. And it is very useful when we are monitoring any SQL environment, since there are like hundreds of SQL performance counters, and many of them are very important for this here. Now we are done with the performance counters. Now let's talk about how you can improve your SQL Server performance. This was about monitoring them and reacting where there is something wrong. This is where you use SysKit, and this is where SysKit is king. But let's talk about how you can improve your SQL performance, and you can use it with tweaking some minor settings often. Now SQL Docket, our second tool here, documents all settings of your SQL environment, enabling you to compare different servers and come to conclusions on what can be done to fix certain issues. Now it is already open here, but if you go to the reports and then this I'm sorry. If you go to the reports and then sorry, there's something. Oh, I'm in the wrong part here. Okay, so when we're talking about documentation of SQL environment, to quickly show how it looks like when we are documenting the parts of your environment that I just mentioned that SQL Docket does, we go to the database engines and advanced settings. And now we can see just how many aspects of SQL Server configurations there are. And for example, I can click on, well, I don't know, on advanced settings. And there we can see, let's say, this setting, maximum degree of parallelism. Now, this one largely depends on whether this SQL Server is used for SharePoint, or for SQL, or for SQL only. Now, in case of SharePoint, it should definitely be set to 1, and if you're using it for SQL only, it should be set to 0. There is also a network packet size. So this setting is set by default to 4096 bits. But if an application performs a bulk copy operation or transfers large amounts of data, a larger packet size may improve your efficiency because it will result in fewer network read and write operations. But you should always look out to keep it under 8016 bytes, because if you cross that, you might have some buffer pool issues, which is, well, definitely not okay also. So I'm just gonna, so now that you know how the SQL Docket works, documenting your inventory and settings, I can jump to the forecasting reports where I was before. So now, so for forecasting, it's not like something where a pretty girl tells you what's the weather gonna be like. But SQL Docket is forecasting on the growth of your databases and their logs. Now, we have selected here the 2 disks. And the SQL Docket has now taken into the consideration the way they were being used, and now taking all of it into calculation, it will predict disk usage over the next few months. Of course, depending on the filter value, we can predict or forecast for up to 1 year ahead. Now, the same thing goes for the database size. I'm just going to select some databases that will show us some meaningful results. Give me a second. Okay, we can take that one, and we can take that one. Okay, so the database forecast reports is where the SysKit help you visualize the growth of selected databases. Of course, this one too, I can select, I don't know, 10 of them, but the load will take a bit longer and the graph would be a little more complicated to read. So this is important for capacity planning, because if your databases are growing very rapidly, you're definitely gonna need more disk space, or they will start causing problems for your entire server, ruining your SQL performance. The same thing goes for the log size. So again, the SQL Docket forecasts the growth of log sizes, and this is important because if log size grows rapidly or overgrows the data file size, that could mean that the SQL server is in bad shape, or that the backup is not being performed regularly, and that is definitely something you don't want to be happening. But I was talking about forecasting now, and these are the problems that may come up one day. But what about the current stuff that you have in your SQL? How can you help you with that? Now, SQL Docket provides you with the best practices. You'll remember the thing I showed you just a few minutes ago regarding that 2 tweaks I told you about in the advanced configuration, about the maximum degree of parallelism and network packet size. Now, there is no sense in going to SQL inventory and manually looking for something that could be set wrong in the SQL Docket. We just provide you with the best practices, and they will help you align your servers according to the latest Microsoft best practices. And I'm just going to go through the few examples here to show you how it actually looks like. So under the configuration, we can select, let's say, this one. Okay, and now, okay, it seems that all our servers are set up right this time, but wrongly configuring values of the max worker treats may result in poor performance or even memory loss issues. This value should always be set to 0, allowing the SQL server to dynamically determine on itself the value depending on the platform and depending on the number of logical CPUs it has at its disposal. And for the database best practices, we can, I don't know, select the virtual log file count. And as you can see, a large number of virtual log files will cause transaction log backups and database recovery to slow down immensely. And that way it will affect the whole SQL server performance. So this is a number that you will try to keep down. We put it here, you should try to keep it down under 900. But you should definitely try to keep it down as low as possible. Some best practices for the model DB, let's say for the auto growth. Now, this is one of those settings that you definitely shouldn't leave by default as the installed server says it. So you should always set it higher and in accordance with your environment requirements. If this is left by default, your database might experience many autogrow events, and this is not good, because each time an autogrowth event is performed, SQL Server holds up the database processing. It kind of stops for a second working, and this equals slower response time for all the SQL commands that you are currently, not you, application or something else is currently processing on that database, and that is slowing the entire SQL Server down. And for some best practices for the TempDB, which is a very important part of the SQL performance. So let's say this is one that is pretty much well known, and when you install an SQL database, the TempDB files are automatically put on the same drive as the SQL Server binaries, and that's definitely a bad practice. The tempdb data files the data files of tempdb should always be separate on a dedicated drive. For the tempdb size, you should always have at least 10% of the largest database on the SQL Server. So the size has to be kind of proportionate. Otherwise, you might experience performance problems. Now, as you can see, there are many best practices that we offer here. I can't simply go through all of them. I just selected some of them and told you something about it, so you should really try it out for yourself. I can give you maybe a few more best practices for the tempdb since it is important. Let's say the recovery model for tempdb should always be set to simple. The growth increment should always be set to a size that can avoid the tempdb files from growing by a too small value. You should always pre-allocate space for all the tempdb files. You should make all the data files the same size, since that way you'll always have the optimal proportional fit performance and better performance for working. And the last one, you should always put the tempdb database on a fast subsystem. As I told you, this was just some of the best practices Sql Docket can help enforce on your SQL servers, and you should definitely check it out, download it, and see it. Well, how many of these best practices have you actually got enforced on your servers? This brings us to the end of today's demo. Let me just switch back to the presentation. Okay, and now that you've seen the tools in action, SysKit and Sql Docket, I really recommend you to try them out yourself if you haven't already. Both products are very simple to deploy and both offer 30-day free trial. If you'd like to arrange a one-on-one demo, feel free to contact our sales team at sales@xcelratio.net. And for the end now, we have the Q&A session. We're going to read and answer a couple of interesting questions from the audience. Can we start with the questions, Frane?
Yeah, sure. Okay, give me just one moment, Silvio. Okay. The first question is, can I define my own best practices? So yes, basically the whole idea of the tool was to have in one place a lot of best practices from Microsoft TechNet, so you can check your own servers against that best practices. So you have really simple to use interface to check all the servers. But if you have something specific in your environment, or you need to change some value, or you need to have some setting that is specific only to your environment, you can do that as well. You can define custom best practice, and then basically the tool will check your server against that new best practice. Why is that important? Because basically if you define that new best practice and if you set a new value, then the tool will send you an alert only when that new value changes on the server. So basically it will not check default best practices that are in the tool. Okay. Can I monitor performance of the servers from multiple domains? Yes. So basically both tools support multiple domain authentication, and you can, for example, if you are a consultant, if you have multiple clients, you can define in the tool credentials for multiple domains, and then basically servers from different domains will use different credentials. So both tools support multi-domain authentication. Let me check. Can I adjust best practices with my own min-max values? Yes. So that was answered in the first question. Can I generate Excel of or Word documentation in SysKit too? Yes, but depend on what you want to do. So basically, if you want just to export some performance counters from SysKit, then of course it can generate some kind of Excel, but basically both tools provide some kind of export. So for example, with Sql Docket, you can export all the best practices to the Word document, and then you can send that Word document to your client, and you can do the same with SysKit as well. Do you have any products that include SQL weight stats? So this is interesting question because we will have in the future something really interesting with the Sql Docket. Basically, you will be able to write your own queries, and basically you will be able to add any value that is on the SQL server. So there will not be any kind of you don't need to wait for us to implement something, but basically you will be able to write your own custom query, and then that query will be executed against the SQL server, and then basically you will have that custom value in best practice or report or whatever. Can you add additional services to monitor? Yes, so Silvio mentioned before, so when you saw SQL Server services there, that is a part of the SQL Server template that basically comes with SysKit, and as a part of, so that template is a part of default installation in the SysKit, and basically there is a set of predefined performance counters and predefined SQL Server services, but you can even add to existing template some other services, or you can create completely new template with the services that are only important for some particular servers that you have. Can alert, so let's move on. Can alert be sent if the BP is failing? Yes, so I believe I answered that before. So basically, if any of the BPs on the server, so the tool, when you install the tool is performing snapshot every day or every week, however you set it up. But basically, if any of the best practices on the server is failing, the tool will alert you, okay, on this server, this BP is failing, you need to check why this is happening. And this is also important when you deploy the tool at your customer site. You don't need, if you don't have access always, you can just receive alert if something was changed on the SQL server. Okay, Silvio, I believe that we covered most of the questions, so if you want to move forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Frane, for answering those questions. And, well, these questions and answering them bring us to the end of our session and the end of the entire webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. And for those who haven't already, do try SysKit and Sql Docket. You like it, and it's free to try. If you have any questions, please contact us at support@excelratio.net. Have a good day. Hopefully, I'll see you soon in another one of our webinars. Thank you again for coming. Take care, guys.
Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.